Breaking news, former President Donald Trump scored a massive legal win today in his election interference case. The Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for all official acts that he took while in office. It was a 6-3 ruling, with the 3 liberal justices filing a dissent. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, sent the case back to the district court to decide now whether Trump's alleged conduct qualifies as official or unofficial acts. The decision could further delay the start of his D.C. criminal trial over charges that he attempted to overturn the 2020 election results. Roberts writes, quote, "We conclude that under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power requires that a former president have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office. At least with respect to the president's exercise of his core constitutional powers, this immunity must be absolute." Roberts added, quote, "The president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law, but Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution." In her dissent, Justice Sotomayor fires back, writing, quote, "Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office for personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends, because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be." That is the majority's message today. Even if these nightmare scenarios never play out, and I pray they never do, the damage has been done. The relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of official powers, the president is now a king above the law. Special counsel Jack Smith had charged Trump with 4 felonies relating to his efforts to overturn the election, and Trump's team had argued in response that his actions were all part of his official duties as president, and thus he could not be prosecuted for those acts. Reacting to the ruling, Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American." Your thoughts, Nayyera?
Well, the case of federal election interference, just from a factual perspective of what we're seeing this morning from this ruling, is that we don't know if Trump, calling Pence and arguing with him about what to do about the votes, or even if Trump calling the Georgia Secretary of State about the votes, if that counts as official, because he did it from the White House, and everything the president does from the White House could now be considered to be official, or if that was campaign election interference, right? 2 very big things. That election interference case, though, is already going to last well beyond this election. And so this legal theory emboldens Trump in this moment, who even before the ruling came out was on radio saying, "This will have a bigger impact on Joe Biden than myself." And Trump has talked about going after his political enemies. That's what he intends to do. So he's signaling that he now has a Supreme Court that will allow him to prosecute political opponents if he gets elected for another 4 years. So, of course, Trump's going to be happy about this. I mean, this is, in general, based on the last couple of days of decision, a court that is grabbing power for itself, not necessarily giving as much to Congress or to the constitutional idea of the executive branch that is supposed to execute Congress's policies.
I agree with that. I mean, in one of the decisions last week, they explicitly gave power back to Congress in terms of the repeal of the Chevron decision. That was them saying, no, Congress is the one that makes laws, not random employees of the federal executive administrative state. They explicitly called on Congress to be an equal branch and actually legislate and actually govern. And there have been cases in recent days, these decisions where the ideological mix of the court was completely scrambled. There was a case where Ketanji Brown Jackson joined the conservatives and Amy Coney Barrett was with the liberals. There was one where the liberals were completely split. So this isn't ideologically. It's not down the line every single time, but this is a down the line one, saying that the president should be immune for prosecution relating to official acts. Now, they don't define what are the official acts and what are the unofficial acts. So your question about whether the call counts as official because it was in the White House is explicitly not resolved by this decision. They call on the lower courts to make an opinion about that, and then it'll go back to the Supreme Court, and then we'll finally get them to say what's an official act and what's an unofficial act, maybe. So the functional aspect of this is that the case is going to go on forever. It will not be wrapped up. It won't even get started before the election.
We are going to be relitigating that election for years and years to come, potentially into multiple presidencies at this point.
Well, we're not going to be relitigating the election. We're going to be litigating whether the things Trump said and did after the election he is criminally liable for.
Well,
I always had a lot of discomfort with the Jack Smith case because it rests on a lot of things that Trump said that I think were totally inappropriate. And to me, the remedy for the conduct that Trump committed, that what occurred on January 6th, what he was doing was impeachment. He was impeached, and then they voted not to remove him from office. And tough luck. That's how it goes sometimes. Now they've been trying to put him in prison for the things he said about the election, which to me is a speech issue, and I've been always
there is that whole challenge of actually using the White House phone and your time to tell somebody to find votes, and the idea of using your own campaign dollars to run an entirely different slate of electors for the Electoral College. And I mean, there was a concerted novel legal theory, an effort for Trump to never acknowledge, and even at the debate, did not acknowledge that he would consider an objective election as legitimate. If he thought it was legitimate, that was his debate answer. Even this next one, he's like, well, if I think it's fair, I will accept it. So all of this is the case, the details of the case aside, this is a candidate and a former president who wants to use the law to get himself in power and do what he wants to do.
Hillary Clinton didn't think her loss was legitimate, and nobody tried to put her in jail. So.
Well, again, the idea, there is a difference. There is a big difference between saying something, and the law is clear.
That's what Trump did. He said it.
And then doing and funding the actions. That's a big part of what the Jack Smith case is that the federal election interference and all of these other people who have taken guilty pleas because they violated the law.
That's in the Georgia case. I agree that the Georgia case is stronger against Trump.
That's part of what Trump,
case is not.
This is all part of that same stew that makes Trump feel empowered to not only run for president again, but also to consider having more power. I want to get back to what you said about the cases in the last couple of days, because it is about Chevron and Loper. Loper hasn't gotten as much attention as others. The combination of the two is interesting right now, I think, because the Constitution makes it very clear who's supposed to interpret laws. Laws that are passed are interpreted by the executive branch. That is what that is, right? That is the purpose of that. The executive branch, they are not random people. Let's not dismiss all of the civil servants who have kept everything functioning about making sure, we get our Social Security and, tax rebates, all of this stuff on time. The experts who sit at the FDA to make sure that our food is safe, right? Like we get these salmonella poisoning alerts, don't buy spinach over here. All of that is the actual day-to-day quality of life functioning of the federal government. The combination of these two cases from Friday, and I know the breaking news is immunity, but my day-to-day life will be far more impacted if those experts no longer get to weigh in on how things happen in this country. Every 2 years, congressional leaders who are elected from increasingly gerrymandered districts, who have their own views about everything and opinions, and who are not actually experts who have served in the field.
We're not. This is a democracy, not an oligarchy ruled by experts.
And
not a
that
technocracy.
is why
the experts don't get to make new policy. The elected legislative representatives.
And
we have rule by Fauci's and Birx's of the world that are totally unaccountable to the American people until this decision, which says no. In fact, the people who are not who were last put in office decades ago do not get to make policy out of whole cloth. The legislative does. That is what our Constitution set up. The agencies are not supposed to be interpreting laws. They're supposed to be carrying out the laws prescribed by Congress. And they've had massive leeway to do whatever the hell they want for decades until now.
Wow.
Now it is over.
And Robby, I hear you on the overregulation. I do. But look at the writing and the legal interpretation. This is not actually turning it back just to the states. What this results in, right? We just talked about.
Not to the states, to Congress.
What we said it gets back to the actual impact of this will be litigation and litigation and litigation. And who decides all of this litigation? When it's when the quote is ambiguous laws passed by Congress, the court ends up interpreting. Do you and I get to vote for federal court judges all the time? Did we vote for anybody in the Supreme Court?
The court determining is what the Constitution prescribes. That is it's the
only person
constitutional law.
The people we get to vote for, members of Congress.
Members of the court are appointed by the executive.
I get to vote for members of Congress, and I get to vote for the president.
Right.
I don't get to vote for the Supreme Court.
Right.
I'm deeply uncomfortable when the Supreme Court decides to pass
take it out with Thomas Jefferson.
that take power into their own hands, that take more and more power going beyond.
They're not taking
now,
more power into their own hands. They're taking power from the executive branch and giving it back to Congress. They're rebalancing the three. That's what I'd say.
In effect, in their own favor.
They're taking power. No, the court is taking power away from the executive.
Federal judges
in
will
the
be
Chevron decision, not in this decision. It goes both ways.
Loper is the one. The combination of Chevron and Loper, and so clearly we're getting into some legal theory here now. And yes, I did actually go to law school, which is why I get nerdy about this.
Right, but
it is that broader idea of, as you get to, right, the broader idea of who should be deciding how day-to-day life works. I don't want to be ruled by anybody. I don't like rulings, right? The idea of being, regulations and rules, I don't love them, but I do strongly, strongly want a federal system, not local community by local community, making sure that things like the national supply chain of food, that is safe. Right? Those are the types of things that I sit there and look at. That's something good that we actually get from the federal government. So let's not mess with that. Let's fix this insane tax code that we have, which is not something that people seem to be worried about litigating.
In that decision, the group that brought the action before the Supreme Court, it was small businesses that were being forced to pay $700 to the National Marine Fisheries Services to be regulated. The National Marine Fisheries Services said that we're extorting you for this amount of money. The small businesses in the fishing category sued, saying, but there's actually nothing in the regulation that says we need to pay this amount of money. And the National Marine Fisheries Services said, right, we are interpreting the statute to say that you have to pay us $700. And they said, but it literally doesn't say that. And it was sued on that basis. So now we are saying that no, if you want to charge the businesses for the cost of being regulated, Congress can write a statute that says precisely that. But the government that is taking in the revenue can't just force them to do it, the executive agency, without it saying that in the law from Congress. I want to go back to that.
So we can agree on that. We can
Congress
absolutely agree on that.
That's the case.
But the Supreme Court.
That's exactly what the Supreme Court said.
That is not. The Supreme Court went beyond that.
They said every other business being built by the government has that same right to have an exactly written.
They went beyond. There is a narrowly tailored interpretation and way to write a decision, and that's not what the majority did here. The majority used this one situation, and rather than answering for that one, decided to take a case and then answer for a much broader.
I would have them go even farther. They said this is not retroactive, and we're not going back in time to all the other ones. It's just moving forward. I wish they'd done that. I wish they'd gone back.
Which, again, this is the debate about how much regulation should or should not be done. The function.
No, who should be doing it?
The function.
Who should be doing it?
The Supreme Court did not limit this to the case in front of them. Right? The Supreme Court decided who should be regulating how much, and in fact, not only said that they set it up so that they would be the ones the decision would come back to over and over and over again. And my point is, set up the system so that people who are elected and directly responsible to us are the ones who get to help put that framework together.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's what the Supreme Court said. That's the way it was intended to be, and that's the way we're going back to.
That's inaccurate, Robby.
No,
that is not what the Supreme Court said.
Exactly
and
what
the irony is, we actually agree on so much of this, but this is where the majority and how they write these opinions. Let's bring it back to immunity, because that was technically the news of today. The immunity one, they could have answered very clearly. If in this specific case, what counts as official and what did not. They're like, no, but you know what? We're not. We're not actually going to solve the official problem in front of us. We're not going to sit here and answer this question for all of you of whether or not Trump can be prosecuted by Jack Smith. We're going to, shove this back to a lower court.
He can be prosecuted if they were official acts.
Right, but they don't give it.
Unofficial
Do you
acts.
see? So this is what this court is doing. They are actually being deeply political and dancing around issues that matter to us that we want answered in real time. They're like, oh, right now, I'm going to take this really long view, tinker a little bit over here, tinker over there, and instead, it's going to create chaos in systems that people have real questions about. What are they supposed to be doing next?
All right, there you have it. More Rising right after this.